Okay, I'd like to reconvene our meeting. It is 7 o'clock. I have item 5, President's announcements. This announcement I have is very important to this board. It has come from the last couple of years of hearing that our district isn't recognizing both communities. And so this is a very sensitive topic, and we recognize the fact that this isn't the way it should be because we're supposed to be one community. I've asked Mrs. Magyar to send out this announcement to all official coaches, to all team managers, anybody who represents our district. We're going to be sending this out to City Council as well in Brecksville and Broadview Heights. I've asked her also, to send it to our PR person so that it can also be pushed out as well to our parents. We would like to make it clear that this board recognizes that this school district should be known as Brecksville Broadview Heights. We reside in both communities, and unfortunately it hasn't always been branded that way. So I'd like to read this to you, and this is what will be going out as soon as this is over. This is our board statement. Pertaining to a matter of great significance and one of community sensitivity, on behalf of the Board of Education, I would like to kindly remind all teams, all clubs, all organizations, and other groups which are formally affiliated with the Brecksville Broadview Heights City Schools that any and all uses of the district's official name is to begin with the Brecksville Broadview Heights City Schools, followed by your organization's name, thereby including a reference to both Brecksville and Broadview Heights. Our school-sponsored organization serves students from both communities, as does our entire district. Inadvertent exclusion of either community from the formal name of our district and its use for your team or club name, though unintentional, is inappropriate and not a clear representation of our school family. Use of our mascot, the bees, followed by your organization's name, or BBHCSD, followed by your organization's name, are appropriate. They are inclusionary alternatives for your use. To close, if and when referring to team, clubs, organizations, and other school-sanctioned groups, please be mindful to include Brecksville and Broadview Heights in the name of our district, as students, staff, and representatives from both communities proudly unite under one umbrella to form our school family and collaboratively enact our belief to be one community. So that is my announcement, and this will be sent out right after this meeting.
Well, maybe tomorrow.
Well, I have promised 2 council members from when I asked you to do it officially, but I promise. I've had a really great partner with Councilwoman Monick in Broadview Heights, and so I assured her that after this meeting I would personally send this to her, so I will be doing that, as well as Councilwoman Redinger as well. I'm going to move on. Item 6, recognition and presentation. We have item A, tennis court update.
Chris, is that one better to be used or just
I will leave the mouse. Alright, bear with me. Alright, I'm Ryan Schmidt with TDA Architecture. Here to give an update on tennis court projects. That being said, alright, so what we have here presently, we've gone through the process of getting survey data done and geotechnical borings done for the project site. The area we're looking at is the current existing tennis court location. For anybody not familiar, the middle school is located where I'm showing on the brick over here. There's that large parking lot located here. The stadium's down in this area, baseball fields, tennis courts reside right here. What we have with the existing tennis courts, with geotechnical borings that we had done, what that does is it analyzes the material makeup of the subgrade that exists below the tennis courts and the surrounding area. So we had borings done at several locations around the courts and within the asphalt edges to see what we had for that makeup. News was good. There was no real indications of lots of organics or anything of that nature that would give us concern as to settling or things of that nature down the road. But what we've experienced at this site, this is an older tennis assembly that was put in years ago. And so over time, being at the bottom of the hill the way it is, there was water migration off of the parking lot through just the natural flow through the grade and into this base. So at some point, some work was done around the perimeter of these tennis courts to install some drainage around the outsides, and there were some basins placed up at this end of the site. That has helped to a degree. That won't ever make what's there something that's salvageable per se. We still have to do a full tear out when we do some sort of a replacement for this project. So that's been our approach. And the thing we want to do is when we replace this, put it in a condition that will serve the district for a really long time. So the first issue that we have is taking care of any water that's coming off the parking lot. Presently, this end of the site, this is the demo plan. So this is existing conditions and what we'd be modifying. This is the revised plan. So currently there are these handful of basins. There's 4 basins down at this area that are collecting water from the parking lot. There is a curb along here. This part of the system is working fairly effectively. Down at this end, however, towards the tennis court end, the curb does depress and water is able to flow over the edge of the parking lot, and there are these basins, but they're outside of the parking lot boundary. So what that effectively means is if you have a very large rain event, water, it's all sloping this way, all the little topographic lines are indicating all the slope is going this way, and so all that water is kind of rushing down this parking lot and overflowing this edge, which is leading to some of the problems that have happened in the past.
Brian, I have a question. Where's the middle school storm line?
Middle school storm line, there is some that runs up in this area up in here, but we're not really touching that.
I understand. I just know where it is. Any of this parking lot line tied to that line right now?
No, let me explain the system.
Okay.
I'm not really formatted in a way to explain. We can jump back to that, and if you have questions at the
Okay.
end, just let me know. But let me plow through it, and we'll come back to that. But essentially, the way we're going to address this issue, presently, all of this drainage that's here is collected, and you can see in the aerials there was a path that was cut into a basin over here by baseball. So this perimeter drainage that was installed was picked up and taken down here. Not a bad idea. This drainage up here, all of this up at the high part of the hill is collected, runs down to this location, ties into the system, and goes out this way. That's fine, it's well and good enough, but what that does is there's still this area along the top edge of those tennis courts that's not really being picked up very effectively. So we have that issue of the overflow, and then there's just the potential for ponding along these edges. So our proposed solution, what we're doing, there's a few things. First thing we're doing is we're leaving these 4 existing basins that are working effectively in place, and then we're taking the basins that are out in the yard and pushing them into the asphalt. What that does is it gets your water collection device in a spot that is more conducive to collection and not allowing it to kind of run into this grassy area. In order to help facilitate that, we're taking and we're cutting out this large section of asphalt, and we're placing the basins along this curb edge, and we're installing a new curb. So what you have now is a curb that rolls off and allows the water to go. We're putting in a curb that will stop the water coming down the hill. We're putting basins along that edge to collect the water, and then it's getting tied into this high drainage system. There's a high storm line that comes along here as far as elevationally it's high. So we're able to pick those up and take them down to this location. The other issue that we had previously is all of this asphalt is sloping down this way. So in order to get this redirected and collecting to these basins, we are taking and we're tipping the asphalt back towards the basins and making sure that that water gets collected as effectively as possible. So that is how we're approaching the water that's coming off of the parking lots themselves. This really doesn't change our output to the main drain system that's tied into your detention basins or anything of that nature. These were all calculated for these events. The problem is there was just in some of the detailing deficiencies in how that was originally kind of conceived. So As we move down into the tennis courts themselves, again, that perimeter drainage that was put in was a good step. It's a good effort when you have an existing condition where the tennis courts are already in place and you can't do any sort of subsurface drainage underneath the tennis courts themselves. So that, like I said, has been helping. So what we're conceding for this portion, there are a couple of things. First, we want to collect the water outside of the tennis courts. So we are putting in a series of drains out around the perimeter of the tennis courts that will collect into essentially a drainage system that outlooks back over here by baseball, similar to what's installed there now. To add to that system and to make this even more effective than it is presently, the geotechnical report that was done by the soils engineer indicated that we should install some drainage beneath the tennis courts themselves. This is a very common practice. We do it on basically every project we do. And their recommendation was underneath the center of each tennis court to run essentially a collector drain so that if any water migrates underneath the tennis courts, there's somewhere for it to collect and outlet into the main piping system. So essentially, if you get water down the hill, there's collection around the perimeter. If it happens to make that next step and get underneath the tennis courts, there's also collection under the tennis courts to help that to get into the system and out of that area. So what this does also is, like I mentioned, we have a high drain system up here on the top of the hill that's collecting for the parking lot. And then we have a low system over here, which is collecting for the tennis courts on the perimeter. So we have effectively separated those two items, whereas previously some of the stuff that was along this edge was draining into the same system. So we were having a little bit of competing priorities with the two storm systems. This essentially separates them the way that they probably should have been done initially when it was all installed. The tennis courts themselves are basically taking a very similar footprint. We're just modifying the edges and making sure that all of our separations are meeting state standards and national standards for high school tennis. We're installing perimeter fencing around all of these 10-foot high chain link, vinyl coated chain link fences. It'll be black fences, which is fairly typical around the area. You're getting the acrylic surfacing across all the tennis court surfaces as well, so that's basically what you've had all this time. It's just going to be nice, new, fresh. It's what you'd see in a tennis court assembly like this. And then obviously new stanchions and stuff of that nature. Any questions to this point? Yes?
Will there be any drainage on the tennis courts themselves and like in between the?
Not in the plane of the actual courts themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do with these is we tend to pitch these a little bit to the outside. If you put any sort of drainage in the courts, that's been done a million times across the country. What that does is it creates weak points in the tennis court itself. It creates areas that you're sloping to, potential for ponding, especially in the winter where you have stuff draining to those areas. So we try to avoid that as much as possible, get the drainage to the outside so we pick it up off of the surface.
So it'll be crowned.
Yeah, slight. You
Right.
don't, the planarity of these courts is very critical. So this, a lot of people go into this going, oh, it's just an asphalt court. It's not that big of a deal. The planarity of a tennis court far exceeds anything you'd see in a parking lot. So it's very high detail when they're laying that stuff out. It's all laser graded and installed very tight dimensions and tolerances. So that being said, it should drain very effectively to the perimeter of that collection system. So
There's a line going through between two lines, right?
right here.
Two courts, yeah, right
Yeah,
there.
yeah. So we've got a collector here, and what that does is it allows it all to get to the shortest path of least resistance. And we've also taken the measure around both courts at the end of each of these lines to install cleanouts. That's something that people don't think about a lot, but you install this system and everybody forgets about it. This allows you the potential, not everybody here, but everybody in general forgets because it's underground, it's easy to do. But what this allows you to do, if you're having any sort of issues or there's any sort of backup, all these cleanouts are essentially, you twist them out and you're able to get in there and jet out those lines so you can clean everything up and get any sort of silt or anything like that that's washed into the system out of the system. It's basically just cleaning house is what it is. And a lot of these old courts that were installed, even if they had drainage underneath them, there wasn't that provision to make sure that you could maintain them down the road. You put it in, if silt got into the system, it was basically filled up and that was the end of it. So, other questions? Yes?
So with the drainage as is in the new plan,
Mhm.
that looks like it'll benefit the baseball courts as well, or baseball fields.
It will help. I can't say to what degree. I mean, it's really intended, this is intended to make the tennis courts as good as possible. So,
So the original main storm line that this is already into,
Mhm.
that's properly sized to handle the entire middle school parking lot?
yes, yeah, all the stuff that we're picking up here, there's essentially a variety of collection points along this edge, and we're hitting 2 of them, so.
But there is a central main line that goes across the street.
Mhm.
That's sized to handle all the middle school parking lot.
Yes.
It's just that the surface finish that's on top of it is not doing the job of sending the water to the point.
Yes.
Basically what you're fixing,
Yeah,
right?
essentially it's that edge line. It's allowing it to.
About half of this was fixed when they did the football stadium, I think. And
This
one-
end down here,
Right.
correct.
and
Start,
I
so
don't know
start,
why.
yeah, so starting at about this, where's
Yeah.
the end of this 4th basin, this whole area they had put in curbing along that edge, and that has dramatically helped the situation, yes. Right.
So we're fixing the other half that's fixed.
Correct. Correct. That's essentially finishing off that edge of the parking lot.
The access road that's on top,
Mhm.
what's the flow provision on that road?
It's similar to what we're doing along this edge. So this is a little less dramatic than what we have as far as the situation here, because essentially this, you're picking up all the sheet flow off of this parking lot. This, we're picking up just the little bits that kind of run off the drive itself. But along this edge and really around the perimeter, we've got essentially a French drain system with aggregate, and then we've also got a handful of basins around there to help pick that up as well.
I like the fact that you're catching it, where's it gonna go?
It goes into this low drain line. So all of these get picked up into a drain line that ties into this system. So like I said before, some of this was going this way, some of this was coming down this way, and now essentially we've taken all of the low drainage and tied it into this baseball line. What would help baseball down the road, if you really wanted to get into it, you'd essentially have to come off of this location here and pull something up into this area. Anything we do at the high point of the hill isn't gonna help as much as down at the bottom of the hill. So
It's not gonna contribute any excess, but it's gonna.
it's gonna, yeah, all this water that was previously coming down here, it will collect some of that, so it will be taking some of that out of the discharge. Other questions? Next slide. Any questions from the board? So essentially what we have, this is our scope of work, in a lot of words and not a lot of numbers, but essentially with the tennis courts themselves, you have the existing courts, so there'd be demo of the existing courts, the existing drainage system, the existing base, pulling out all the asphalt, all those sorts of things. There'd be redistribution of topsoil, so as you're doing this, we'd be regrading. So it's essentially stripping off topsoil around the perimeter, regrading. You end up having to do touch-up and seeding around the perimeters. And then we will have some excess materials, because some of it's gonna be bad. When we pull this out, it's just gonna be saturated or mud, or too blended. Because when you pull out, like if we had some aggregate areas and there's topsoil gets mixed in, it essentially becomes invaluable. It's not valuable for what we're trying to do. We need good compacting soil, or we need heavy drainage soil. So those are the 2 types of systems. The subgrade, this is essentially the base below the tennis courts themselves. So we'd be cutting that down. We're gonna have to cut it to a depth that allows us to install our near drainage material, which is our base material underneath that. We'd be exporting all the excess materials that we're hogging out of that area, and then the fine grading. So again, the tolerances that I talked about, when they go across the tennis courts and they're doing the grading of the stone, it's very precise.
Oh, yeah.
The erosion provisions, this is just standard for any sort of project like this. You just need to put up erosion fencing and stuff of that nature. The storm sewer, we talked about in pretty good detail. Essentially, that's perimeter drains around the tennis courts themselves, the under drains underneath the tennis courts, and then it's connection points to those existing basins and the system that's down towards the baseball area itself. And then the tennis courts, last but not least, that is the stone base that goes underneath your asphalt. There's a 2-inch asphalt base system. They essentially put down a binder that gets attached to the top of that called the tack coat. And then you put your finished surface on top of that. What this does, this sort of assembly, is down the road if we get a little hump or bump or something like that in the asphalt, by having these 2-piece assembly, it allows it to easily be milled off, and you can do some patch repair, something of that nature, rather than ripping out the entire system. So this is kind of a provision. This is how we build just about everything nowadays. After that, you get your 1.5-inch surface course. There's a curb around the perimeter of the courts to hold them together. Essentially, what you have in a lot of the old courts is around the perimeter edge, there was no sort of restraining element, so asphalt will just kind of spall off and it will roll off the edges. That leads to more deterioration than anything. You'll see it if you just walk around the outside, it will crumble. So there's the curbing, and then there's an acrylic court surface system that's essentially a two-layer system that goes on top. That's your color. That's what makes it look pretty, and that's what also puts the playing surface on. 10-foot chain link fence. That's a vinyl coated chain link fence. The nets and post system, and then there's that existing wood access stair that comes down the hill. We're replacing that with a new concrete stair and rail system that comes down off the parking lot. There's going to be enough work over in that area that it's really necessary to do that. So the cost for all of this, it's based off of a project we just completed 6 months ago. Those came in at about $75,000 a quart. It's very, very, very similar scope in what was done there. And so that's where this pricing really reflects. That was through a bid process, low bidder, stuff of that nature, nice big firm ended up installing it. It looked great. Parking drainage modifications, we broke this out just to give an indication of, while these do not pertain to the tennis courts themselves specifically, these would be long-term a wise choice to install this system. So essentially, this is all that stuff that I was talking about that starts at the curb line and works its way back onto the parking lots themselves. So that picks up the demo of what's there existing, that's topsoil, all that stuff that I mentioned before, the stripping, regrading, prepping, seeding, stuff like that. There is subgrade underneath the asphalt that we'll be repairing and elevating. Erosion control measures, which I mentioned before. The storm sewer, this is adding those handful of basins and then tying into the high collection point. And then reworking, essentially reworking that asphalt that happens at the top edge to drain back to those collection members. And then the other thing that we pick up here too is that 250 to 280 foot of curb that wasn't put in previously, that's essentially creating that dam, for lack of a better word, along that edge to help redirect the flow of water. So, and this is really based on just unit prices for these particular elements. And we're in that kind of $75,000 to $100,000 range for this portion of the work. Questions on pricing or?
So, one question I have. So, the contractors that would be interested in bidding on this work, you know, would they generally be the same ones that would want to do both? Or is the tennis course more specialized versus the parking and draining is less?
No, I mean, anybody that does this, any of the bigger companies that do like tennis courts, for example, they have either subcontractors that they work with very closely on all these types of projects. They don't want to be constantly going out and trying to find those relationships, or they do it themselves. So this type of work, the sub-draining, all the stuff below that, is very common, and they've been used to doing that. They'd expect to do that. So there's nothing we're doing here. Like, you could do this drainage part as a separate project. You could do this as a separate project. You would get advantage in bidding them together if you ultimately did that, in that you wouldn't be paying as much overhead profit and stuff like mobilization fees, job superintendent fees, stuff like that they tack on basically other general conditions.
Does it make sense to look at them as two separate projects? In other words, is it a prudent decision to do the tennis courts, as you said, without doing the draining?
I would advise against it. I always want to do, when you're doing a tennis court that costs this much money, I would highly recommend going to the level of making sure that everything that happens upstream of that is taken care of before you put it in. It'd be like installing wood floor in your house and not fixing your roof first. You want to make sure that you've attacked the potential problem and then make sure that everything you do inside is going to be as effective and long-term as you possibly could. I think this solution does all of that. It gets you as much benefit of your tennis courts, and then when you put in your tennis courts, you'll get the most life out of those as you possibly could.
Just for food for thought, okay, if you flip to the per chart again for me.
I will try. This one.
there's a whole road downstream of this that you probably should look at. And there's half the parking lot that you don't see on top of this picture that you should look at.
This area over here.
And now on top left-hand corner.
Up
Look
here.
at it in terms of,
In terms of stormwater management.
like enlarging the scope of this to do more?
No, I'm just saying, it's something that's gonna come down,
Understand.
okay, long term. And that road that's downstream of the tennis courts, it's unprotected either.
This, I will say, the conditions you have here are very typical for any sort of campus in the area. A lot of stuff was built very fast in the time period that this was constructed. And so you'd be adding parking lots, doing a lot of those things. And nowadays, when you go back in and you do a parking lot project, or you do a tennis court project or something like that, you ultimately go in and try to fix some of those issues that might have cropped up from previous.
Let me ask Chris, because when we went through our PI list, right, there was asphalt, concrete drainage in there, right? So I'm sure this isn't the only place where there's work like this that needs to be done. Does this, is there an opportunity to take that part and bundle it in with other drainage and asphalt work that's needed to bid it? Or is it, you know what I'm saying, like if you wanted to separate it but still get the economies of doing
So
it
do
with
you have
other work?
a large asphalt contractor that could possibly repave a parking lot or a road, do this work rather than the tennis court company? Is that-
I'm saying, let's say we split the two in terms of timing, right? Because if you picked one company and bid it both, you could do it both at the same time. I'm just thinking, if you split it and you were to do this parking drainage separately, could you potentially bundle it with other similar work we're doing in the district? I think it was 250 in our PI list of asphalt drainage, right? So could you take this, bundle it in just to get better pricing because it's more work?
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Where were you proposing the other work? Because that would be, if it's not close to here, you lose that advantage.
The lower road between the two, yes.
This road?
Yes.
That's close enough, you could potentially pick up some advantage for these two. The thing that you won't get ever is if you're starting to do this kind of work, this guy is not the same as this guy. Those are two different types of contractors, so you're not getting that sort of savings. But to your point, this piece is similar to what this is, so you could see some advantage in pricing from whatever.
Well, and that's what I'm wondering is that the number of firms that can do the general drainage and pavement is probably larger than the number of firms that can do a tennis court, because it's more specialized.
Completely.
And while the tennis companies that can do a tennis court could also do, the parking lot, they're probably not as price competitive as the more general firm that just does asphalt and drainage and whatnot.
And quite honestly, the companies that do this type of work rarely do this kind of work in and of itself. So you're not going to have
They wouldn't even bid on
Heiberger
something like
or
that.
Vasco or somebody like that attempting to do road work. They typically don't bid that kind of thing. So those types of contractors that do the tennis court systems, that's kind of their niche. They have the equipment for that sort of thing. And if they were doing a more extensive part of parking lot, they might not even pave it themselves. They might hire, one of the other local companies. There are a lot of really good local asphalt companies to come in and do that piece of it. So, this can be bid, if you ultimately bid it that way, you could bid this as like a contract A, contract B sort of thing. We do that a lot, and there'd be a contract C option. Contract A would be tennis courts, contract B would be the paving, for example, and then contract C would be a combo bid. And you can see how all those prices line up and see if there's any advantage. The thing that I would say is if they get close, and you had a combo C that was close to an A and a B with different companies, I would tend towards the contract C that's all under one umbrella. Just even if you're paying a little bit more, just you have that kind of relationship of that work, unless you break this off and tie it to some other work. That's what. Less cooks in the kitchen. Other questions? Concerns?
Right there.
Yes.
I know at one point there was discussions about making it wheelchair accessible. Do you know if that's included in what we're looking at?
With this edge, it's really prohibitive. You can't really get down this edge. If we were to do that, your access point would have to come down in some area down here. We have not incorporated that.
Okay.
Try to tie in from the levelest point on the road on top.
Up here, even this, you can see right here, there's some really heavy topography out through here. It flattens out down here. You
Right.
could potentially do it down here. The only thing I don't like about this is that you're trying to get people to come down a roadway to access this, and I tend to not want people to walk down the roadway. If you're able to come off the parking lot down here, for example, where it's fairly flat, you could put in a small section of sidewalk and pick up that. We'd probably want to widen this edge a little bit if that was something that ultimately we want to pursue.
Would you be able to come in from the baseball field area?
Down here, no. It's hard to see in this.
No, the top of the hill.
Up here?
Yeah, basically right between the baseball bleachers and the batting cage, where that line runs, right there.
Right there. That is not terrible. The thing I like about over here, there's a little bit of topography, but this is next to parking.
Yeah.
So you could essentially park over there and get access to it and not have to walk down along here. I guess you could park along this edge and kind of make your way in here too.
I only say that because that makes the baseball bleachers ADA compliant.
Well,
That's a fair point.
Those two.
One of the conditions for USDA grant is ADA wheelchair access, so this is something the
And
top
really,
line.
really what you'd be adding is sidewalk. And sidewalk is $6 a square foot, $7 a square foot. So it's just the distance and whatever we want for a width. I mean, something like this would probably be doing 5-6 foot wide sidewalk typically. Other questions?
Okay. So next steps, we're still gonna continue fundraising, right? And so I see that you've been working very hard and you have a lot of things in the hopper for that. You've made your plans for the spring. The board will be looking at priorities. We have a list of 10 priorities, and if you look at that on our agenda, this is one thing on that list. I mean, it sounds like, Mark came up with some good points with maybe how we creatively look at this. When we bid something out, we have to have the money ready in place to start bidding, because you have to take the bid, so we can't just do that, and see what comes back.
You
Is
can't
that
do a
right?
speculation.
Right.
No, I mean, it would not be fair to bidders, and you would get filed.
Plus, the bids will change over time as things change over time, so you need to do it as you're ready to go.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So right now, we're in a holding pattern
The
still.
difference would be is if you were on the cusp and you're hoping for a bid to come in where we're anticipating it, and that would be the only time I would say, yeah, you're probably okay to bid. But if it's something where you're, $50,000 or $100,000
Right.
where we're anticipating, I would.
Which is where we're at currently.
Yeah,
So.
I would wait.
Okay. All right.
Well, so the other item that the board, eventually needs to give some direction on now that we've had the presentation is that, because the costs were split out, at least for illustrative purposes, if you did it separately, there's the drainage and then there's the tennis courts. So, just to maybe reground everybody in our tennis community, where the board was the last time we talked and said the direction was the board was committed to putting $250,000 into the tennis courts. And the drainage was like this thing over here, it's like, is that part of the tennis courts, is it not part of the tennis courts? So we have pricing separate, so if the board's commitment is $250, and the tennis courts by themselves is, the estimate's $380 to $400, so just take the top end, so that leaves $150 difference just to do the tennis courts. And the tennis community has been fundraising, so right now that is the portion, and then there's the $75,000 to $100,000 to do the drainage, which the board needs to give thought to. Do we, is that considered part of the tennis project, which then elevates its cost to, up to $500,000? Or is that segregated off of the tennis courts and back on the board's list as another priority, realizing that has to be done, or is being recommended to be done in conjunction with the tennis courts? Right?
Right.
I guess, Chris, do you have any sense of, because I know these are just estimates, but the estimates can change if you're giving contractors more work. And when we look at our PI, and the drainage work that's on our PI list, that's close by to this, do you have any sense of what this would, what this could do from a pricing standpoint if it gets bundled in with the other drainage work and we go with, contractors that are just doing more general asphalt and drainage?
So the large project obviously is the drive between the baseball fields. And that would be the $250,000 that you referenced. And then we spend about $50,000 a year just maintaining the existing lots, crack filling and fixing, collapsing catch basins and so forth. So I mean, we would have to take a look at and refocus, and I can't, and again, I'm on my computer with me, darn it. I don't recall what fiscal year I identified the $250,000 in. I can't remember if it was 21 or 22.
23.
23.
Yeah. You got 20,000 next year, 150,000 in 22, 250 in 23, and 25 in 24. Well, I guess from a board standpoint, we don't, because we're not ready to pull the trigger and have the money to go forward on the tennis project right now, we have some time to think about this, on how we want to handle it. So I don't think that changes the path forward, which is, fundraising is needed so that funds can be available to do the tennis courts. And then maybe we Chris, take a look at this and see what options are there if we bundle this in with the other drainage work. That item on our master plan ranking is item 8. So out of our top items, it's a little lower on the list because we can keep the repairs.
The tennis courts or?
No, the item is site, asphalt, concrete, and drainage. That's on our master list, and it's item 8. Tennis courts are number 2. Three. Tennis courts are number 3, right after roofing and middle school security vestibule. So tennis courts are very high, but so anyway, the drainage portion of the tennis project, we don't need to give any direction today on it, but it is an item the board will need to revisit to figure out what do we want to do with that, and maybe we can get some options if you can look at pricing on some of this.
And what you'll have too, I mean, within a matter of a week or two, we'll have construction documents for all the work I just described. So our engineers are finalizing all those documents, and I mean, if we need to break some of that off or they need to reallocate that to a different project that you envision, they could definitely do that sort of thing. So you have flexibility, but this part's been designed, so it's ready to go operate.
But I do think, for our tennis community, you do need to provide some direction on whether you're gonna include the drainage as part of that, so they have some, goals for fundraising. So, I mean, I think, while you don't need to make that decision, you need to give some direction. And are you thinking about, is that a cost that we're adding to the tennis court project, or is this a cost that the board wants to look at on their own, and then you don't need to make a decision how that happens? But I think for our tennis parents who are actively fundraising, they need to know what their target is. So if the board's committed to $250,000 and you're saying that includes the drainage, then they're raising $250,000. If you're saying no, that the board will take care of that, they're raising the delta between the $250,000 that the board committed and whatever it is that they need for that tennis court. So, for our tennis parents, I think that, that's a conversation that you probably should decide sooner than later so that they have some direction and goals to set for their fundraising.
Yeah, I mean, we are very sensitive, and we all agree that we're gonna be working together on this, and we're gonna look for creative ways to get that number so it's doable. So just keep doing what you're doing, and we'll keep having this conversation. It might be next month, it might be the following, but, for now, we have the spring set, but, well, we're committing to, like you said, to getting this done with you.
Well, and I mean, I think we need to, Craig is coming on board officially as of February 3rd. And so this is one of the things we had just talked about at our work session earlier. he's gonna know a little bit more once he's on board. And hopefully can advise us of creative ways to.
And Craig has a history of creative solutions. Before his treasurer job, so if you weren't aware, he was in charge of aquatics. So,
How are you with
We're-
asphalt?
yeah.
I've learned a lot about asphalt at Brookville actually, so.
He carries bags allegedly. Weren't you carrying sandbags
I
one week?
carry
Yeah, I
sandbags
remember.
and gravel, yes.
Yeah, gravel, so yeah, we may put him to work as well, so. But we'll keep working on this, okay?
Yeah, I
And one
think,
thing,
yeah, I mean, I think, Joel makes a good point. We do need to put a stake in the ground.
we do,
Sooner rather than later. Maybe let's come back in the next meeting and maybe Chris, you can take a look at some of this drainage stuff and see what your thoughts are. Craig gets in, see, so we can circle back. It's not gonna change any of our path forward if we take a month or two to get, explore
Right.
what our options are, but that's something we have to circle back on.
So, and just one other point to consider, from a timing standpoint, we have plans for what we're doing with spring season of tennis, but depending on where you are in your fundraising efforts, that also could impact the fall season of tennis. And so, wherever you are and coming up to whatever number, that also, because those schedules start to get set now too. So we have to know what we're doing for fall as well, because if we're waiting a couple months to make a decision or figure that out, and in combination not having the funds, that information be known sooner than later. So, I let Dan know that, this could impact more than one season. Right now, the plan was only spring, based on before we knew numbers and what have you. But now we're looking at a potential second season of tennis, so we need to know that sooner than later as well, just so we can plan accordingly.
I just, some clarifications regarding the drainage specifics. So, Ryan was very clear that he makes a recommendation that we do not install the tennis courts without the drainage. I just need clarification, is the board looking at doing the drainage independently, because that's what I'm exploring. See if we can't roll that into other asphalt work that we perform. So that would then not be a part of the tennis court project. We would fund that out of permanent improvement funds moving forward. If it's our intention to do the drainage and asphalt work this coming summer, which I would think it is, because it's a high priority, then we are going to want to work with Ryan to get that out to bid as quickly as possible, which means we would be before the board in February with an asphalt bid package that would include this work. So that that piece of this project is addressed in support of the future installation of the tennis courts.
Yeah, it makes sense, if we're gonna do that, it makes sense to do that. If we're gonna separate it, it makes sense to do that first. So-
I mean, separating them with the idea that there's a cost savings. The board would have to see, does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, some of this, the option to separate it and bundle it in with other asphalt and drainage work is put out as, can this save us money,
Yes,
right? And so if we can, then it makes sense to take that bite of the apple first and.
and so again, I'm going to use Ryan's previous statement again. There is generally savings, it's pretty much automatic. Mobilization costs are going to be the same whether you do just this work or this work in additional asphalt work. So there would be savings that are going to be built in to a larger project. So by nature of doing more work, you save money. You also get more competition when you're looking at larger work. And so sometimes that drives price. And so we will certainly get together and develop that and present it to the board as quickly as we can.
Appreciate
Yeah, that sounds.
We have a mid-February meeting, which we still have to discuss with other board members, but we had talked about it at our agenda meeting, where we had that mid-February meeting, where maybe if this was we could actually not make any decision-making, but we would have the information by that mid-February meeting, which I believe was, we were gonna talk about February 10th. Is that right, Mark? February 9th and 10th. Is that too short of a runway for you
I
to?
think it was the 11th.
So is that just to discuss scope, or is that for bids?
We were gonna use that as a opportunity to discuss whatever came up in between board meetings.
That would be enough time to maybe talk about scope,
Yes.
but you wouldn't have time to bid it.
No,
I think you need to know now, right?
No, Ryan and I will get together and we will develop a scope of work to present to the board mid-February.
is it February 9th or 10th?
February 11th, and I think we said to have it at like early because of like 5:30, did we say?
Well, that's what I wrote down. I mean,
Yeah.
That's all tentative, but.
Which we still have to work out
Board.
ourselves, but
Right,
that's
yeah.
what tentatively we're putting on the table, okay? So that would be a good midway point for us to then possibly make a decision, okay?
Just to be clear, that the scope of work, what is gonna be in that scope?
So we will look at some of the asphalt issues along this drive, and we have some serious asphalt issues in the high school parking lot as well, which is close enough. So,
Alright.
I have a question can you go back to that one slide with all the prices on there? Just had a quick question for you. Now, the price for the tennis courts and everything, is that going through like Vasco, for example, to put down the courts, or is that just?
This would be a qualified tennis court installer, yes. So essentially what we write in our bid specification is that the contractor installing the tennis court system has to have, 7 years experience installing tennis courts and yada, yada, yada. Basically to cover your bases, to make sure that you don't end up with somebody that's a road paver that's installing tennis courts.
Now, for an example, like Vasco came out, like when Chris and I were there and Mark, and Vasco gave an estimate for the courts to redo them completely, everything at about $3 to $325 for the 5 courts. So the price point there, like where is if you could explain where the excess like 75K is coming from,
If you're,
in
it's not-
addition to that?
Yeah, it's not quite that. I mean, we're at 380 and you were saying 325, so it's,
Like 3 to 325, so if
Yeah.
you're on one end to the other, I mean,
So-
still.
the point is they oftentimes, they're giving you a fly by the seat of their pants sort of number, which is not my favorite way to approach this sort of thing, is just walking out there and taking a look at it. They haven't looked at the grading, they haven't included the stairs, they haven't included the perimeter drainage, is my guess. And if they give you a price when they bid it and it comes in at that 325, jump on it. I mean, that would be a great price. But this pricing is identical in a lot of ways to projects we've literally just bid and just built. And this is actually a touch under that, just because I think some of the things we're doing at this tennis court are a little simpler than the other one we did. That one was actually 75,800 and change per tennis court. This is a little under that in kind of our speculation, and it's just based on the fact that you have an existing footprint there. So I feel a lot of times when you get that kind of just somebody showing up on site, you get a number that might not have all the pieces parts baked into it necessarily.
So this number is your estimated based on what's been done for other courts, but it
Yes.
could be
Yes.
a fair amount lower, like not a ridiculous amount lower. but it
Vasco
could be.
bid the other job that I was talking about, and they were
Okay.
higher. So, again, it depends on who came out and visited the site, who gave you the numbers, what information they had at the time. They're a great company. I'm not talking down about them. I'm talking down a little bit about that process. I think that process has holes in it, and that you lose some of this information. There might be pieces, parts they're not contemplating when they're giving that pricing. But again, if they came in that low, that'd be fantastic. But my expectation is based on the project we just had done, we're gonna be somewhere in that neighborhood, especially, this project was done, this last year, prices don't go down, so everything kind of tends to go up a little bit, so, this number is building in a little bit of that fat to make sure that you've got a little bit of protection, so.
Do we know what type of warranty or guarantee would come with this type of project?
Just the surface. Generally, they give a warranty on the surface itself. The asphalt, nobody will warrant asphalt. So it's only as good as the base and everything that you put in. That's why when you do it, you have your geotech company that did the geotechnical investigation on site to make sure compaction is going properly and all that stuff's happening effectively. You have people's eyes on it, making sure it's all getting installed properly. It's in the ground. This is the best system we could come up with. This is a very solid system. That isn't to say you have a crazy cold year that throws something off and you have a little hump. That kind of stuff could still happen because it's in the ground and anything can happen. this puts us in about as good a position to be effective long-term as I could foresee. This is a very good system that you'll be getting installed here, so. Just throwing a caveat out there, that's any sort of groundswell or groundwater or anything like that could happen, and so they won't warrant it for those reasons, so. The equipment will all have warranty, so I mean, all your tennis equipment and that sort of stuff, but it's really the asphalt, they just don't do that.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Wait,
Oh, so sorry.
Is the type of asphalt you're using, is that anything special than what would be used in paving a parking lot?
Yes, it's no oxides. What that means is you don't want to have any iron in the asphalt itself. If anybody's been to the Costco down in
Macedonia?
Macedonia area, that parking lot is full of oxides, and you can see all those kind of swells and blooms of rust essentially in the parking lot. You put in asphalt that doesn't have that in it so that you don't get any of those blooms, and that's more expensive.
So if a project like this was done and the underlayment is done properly, the drainage and all the site work, then there shouldn't be any issues of, I would think that the issues of bubbling or
You shouldn't have any issues.
you're not driving heavy equipment on it,
No,
these are
no.
tennis courts.
No, and like
They won't warranty,
they won't warranty
that.
it. You'll see tennis courts that are 50 years old that have been there for 50 years and they still look good because there's no traffic on it. There's none of that sort of stuff. But they probably have proper drainage or good drainage off to the sides. So long as the drainage system is installed and maintained long-term effectively, I mean, you should have good tennis courts for a very long time.
So what kind of warranty would your company offer on?
We can't warrant it either. I mean, it's essentially, it's a ground-based system. I mean, it'd be like just anything in the dirt trying to warranty that. You'll have people that will go through doing essentially soil stabilization. They won't warranty it. They'll go through and essentially build an asphalt base of stone and they won't warranty it. It's just with ground conditions, you can't warranty something that is so subject to water movement and cold and heat and maintenance issues and stuff like that. You just can't do it. So we can't offer warranties for anything. We're just architects and engineers. Not just. Thanks.
Anything else?
I have a question.
Yes.
In regards to fundraising and the other courts that you've built, are you aware of any grants or funding that we can take advantage of?
No, not specifically. It is oftentimes a heavy donor that has helped out on the tennis projects we've done. Tennis courts, by and large, are hard to fundraise for in our experience just because the exposure isn't huge. Like a turf field, you have a lot of different organizations that are using it, so you get a lot more exposure. Tennis courts are tennis specific, so it's more difficult, and so it's usually a heavy donor, unfortunately.
So in your diagram, you're proposing moving those drains out into the parking lot, the middle school parking lot? And when I was driving by today to pick up my daughter from the high school, and in previous years, I noticed they pushed all the snow from the middle school up onto the landscaping, so onto the grass. So it seems to me that drainage would then not be helpful because the water will be rolling down the hill when it melts.
That is a very valid point that Chris and I have had many conversations about. That is why we are also doing the drainage along here. So we have this high drainage that's happening along this edge, but we also have low drainage that's happening along the courts themselves. Those drains that are out there now, they're just little spot drains. They're essentially like a floor drain in a bathroom or something where it just kind of swells down to that spot. So it's not picking up wide coverage. It's just kind of a small spot sort of drain at that location. So they're not being very effective. So by putting in this essentially French drain along this edge and these couple of drains that we have along this perimeter, we're picking up water that would migrate down. And then likewise, to your point, if water does get down that hill, we do have the drainage under here. So I think we're doing just about as much as you could possibly do to limit that potential issue. So very valid point though, I agree with you.
Anything else? Okay, so we'll revisit this at that mid-February meeting
Absolutely.
with the scope. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you everybody for coming. I appreciate your.
So we have item 7, other board business. We have a motion to amend the agenda and add item I, which is a resolution. So Fred moved, Mark second. Do we need a roll call on that?
Yes. Mr. Dolson? Yes. Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Thank you for coming.
Mrs. Whitman?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack?
Yes. And I have an item I. So A, we have resignation of the interim treasurer. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Samantha?
I would just like to personally thank you, John, for coming in and diving right in head first into a situation I know, that was unexpected to all of us. You have just been incredible, and I appreciate all of your support and your attitude here. You've been like just this great addition to our staff, and I know all of us are going to miss you terribly. And just thank you from the bottom of my heart.
All right, take your own roll call. Then how many days you can announce? So now, go ahead.
Mr. Dolson? Yes. Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack?
Yes.
8 days.
But who's counting? All right. Item C, hiring of administrative consultant. May I have a motion? Okay, this is,
So as you resign, we're glad that you might come back for a few days. So this is to actually have John come back and work with Craig on an as-needed basis for a couple of days and during the month of February if needed. And so we're glad to have you back. After you just resigned, we're glad to have you back.
I think it's up to 5 days.
Up to 5,
Which
yeah,
is
up to 40
hours.
hours, yes.
Up to 40 hours.
Yes.
It probably won't be that many.
Okay, roll call.
Mr. Dolson? Yes. Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack?
Yes, enemy resolution and opposition of ed choice. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so as many of you have heard and know, Ed Choice expanded this year, unfortunately, and what happened with Ed Choice is that certain buildings that earned a certain grade in a particular area of the report card, a voucher system was basically opened up for any student in those attendance boundaries. In that expansion of Ed Choice, Highland Drive was added as a building. From a state perspective, they went from having 237 buildings identified for Ed Choice statewide to over 1,300 this year due to a change in law. And so what happened was Highland got identified as one of those buildings that would fall under Ed Choice. So anybody currently that would reside in the Highland attendance boundaries would have the option of taking a voucher up to a value of $6,000 and go to a private or charter school, which has a significant impact on our bottom line because that money is taken right out of our foundation formula. We don't see it. So it's just taken right out. We never see it. So it could have a huge impact on school districts. We have all rallied and went to our state legislators to say this is, how do you look at this data? Because they went back to 2015 and looked at performance in many of these cases of what we did in 2015. And if you received a D or an F in any one area of the report card in any 2 given years, in 15 or 17, 18, or 18, 19, you were now designated under this provision. And so we worked with our legislators. There is new legislation that is supposed to be passed prior to the February 1st deadline. And we're hoping that that legislation gets passed. If that is the case, Highland Drive will not be designated as an Ed Choice building any longer. And so the resolution that is before our board is in support of, or is in opposition to Ed Choice, and hoping that with all of the support that we are bombarding our legislators with, that this will get through prior to the deadline and Highland Drive would lose that designation.
Well, and also in recognition of the fact that even if Highland Drive does get off, that we're not in support of Ed Choice. At least I can specifically speak for myself that it's another voucher system which is not regulated, which is not a good use of taxpayer dollars.
No, it's not. So, we're subject to our state report card, any public school is. And so the voucher is to allow parents to have choices to send their kids to a Catholic or charter school that are not subject to the state report card. So there's no data point to show that even if you take advantage of that voucher, that you are actually going to a better school than you are right now, because there's no accountability system. Furthermore, if Ed Choice goes through as written, it has a significant impact on teachers and STRS. I don't know if our teachers are aware of that, because as the need in public school will decrease, meaning because kids will take advantage of these vouchers and go to private schools, the need for teachers is going to decrease if our enrollment is impacted in any way, shape, or form. That also is going to increase the number of teachers that are teaching at private and parochial schools, which means less money that is going into STRS, which puts STRS then in trouble to say that there might not be money for when we all retire, because there's not enough teachers putting into STRS if teachers are leaving and going to private. Right now, STRS is, on volatile ground as it is, because right now, state teachers' retirement system is funding 1-to-1. So for every one teacher that pays into STRS, we are funding one teacher. It used to be a 2-to-1, where 2 teachers that would pay in were funding 1. That ratio is flipped because people are retiring and living longer. So STRS is volatile as it is. So the impact of our potential retirement system by pulling more teachers out of the public schools into the private, for people who take advantage of this voucher system, can be very detrimental to our profession as a whole.
And people ask, why is this happening? And in some of our minds, it's another attempt to defund public education.
It's been going on for 15 years,
It's
slowly
been
but
going,
surely.
it
This
has
is
been
another-
going on ever since I've been on the board. And so, other than that, the rationale, there's nothing from an educational standpoint that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So, okay. Roll call?
Mr. Dolson? Yes. Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack?
Yes. Item G, approval of new minimum wage. May I have a motion?
So moved.
This is,
John?
you sound like a McDonald's, John. What is going on?
It's, minimum wage went up January 1st, 2020.
Gotcha.
It went up to $8.70 for the, and we have to increase paying of our lowest paid staff members, additional pennies.
All right. Roll call?
Mr. Dolson? Yes. Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack?
Yes. Item I have the resolution that I added. On this resolution, may I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, this resolution is authorizing the president and the treasurer of the board and the superintendent of the school district to enter into an amended and restated compensation agreement with the city of Brecksville and the D. Geronimo Development LLC related to the development of the former Veterans Affairs Administration property. May I have a roll call?
Mr. Dolson? Yes. Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack?
Yes. Okay. Item 8, community communications. Hearing of the public. Does anyone wish to be heard? Okay, we're gonna move on then. Item 9, board member committee reports. We have the financial liaison audit committee.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Mr. Dolson, I sent you up a letter from the auditor. It's dated June 30th, 2019. It's a management letter. It has been released unofficially. And if you go to page 2, we were dinged a couple little items last year.
Define what dinged means. Like, what's that mean?
A dead door.
There were areas of improvement that needed identified. We got like a NI, and needs improvement, right?
No, this one here is opportunities for business improvement. You do not have to take the recommendations.
Okay.
But you can do them. Beekeeper's tuition. There's a lady there, and I can't tell you who it might be. She makes the deposits. She records the deposits. She records the receipts. goes and does the banking, and the auditors are recommending that job be segregated a little bit. So Brian and I are working on trying to fix it.
Okay.
Second item is the payroll procedures. This statement is, in my opinion, is completely wrong. This is the responsibility of the treasurer to complete. That staff member does the calculations, and the treasurer should be there to proofread what she has typed. They are trying to tell us that Human Resource Department should be doing this, and that's absolutely false. The schedule of expenditure of federal awards, when I sent this out to you, I thought it was a questionable area in the food service department, and it was not my fault. This is the finance office did not close out the National School Lunch Program in 2019. And you cannot go back now to fix it. Basically, you should be taking the commodities from the food service department and putting them into the charts that's on the computer, and that was not done. And those are dates. On the second page, these are non-compliance citations. Sometimes I do get irritated a little bit with the auditors. They dinged us. They found one purchase order out of 20,000 purchase orders that one of our staff, in the old days, you used to have a $12,000 limit. Now you have a $10,000 limit. And you know when you get old, you don't remember what it used to be. And so she thought it was 12,000, and it's actually 10,000. So that's been fixed. She got slapped around a little bit.
Not physically.
Figuratively, right?
Figuratively.
The other item, they want deposits made every day, and I'm totally, completely in agreement with that. There is some reasons this district does not make deposits on a daily basis. Now, is it forget? I don't know. But it could have been a snow day, it could have been a holiday, it could have been on sick leave, and it didn't get deposited that first day.
You need to be like the post office. Nothing's gonna stop you, is that correct?
Like,
Okay,
you
gotcha.
come through snow,
Yep,
rain.
yep, we need to get that slapped up before this guy joins us.
But they
for
found
sure.
2 cases out of 75,000 receipts we did. Don't think I'm not irritable. 9 days.
8. I thought you said 8.
The last item is, what they wrote is completely right. None of the appropriations or revenue accounts were posted to the books last year. They are posted this year. So it's been fixed. But I don't know how that could have happened.
Are you saying that they were zero budgets?
That's why
Just wanna
Brian,
make sure we're on the same
that's why
terminology.
Brian only got $14,000 in wages.
Okay,
That's
so
the good
Craig,
part.
you're aware of all of this and you hear these recommendations,
I do.
okay?
He's meeting with the auditors.
We expect you here Christmas, making those deposits, okay? The expectation's been set.
He's meeting with the auditors, probably with you because you wanted to attend the audit,
Yeah,
so. And the superintendent.
okay. So, let me see.
Can we just follow, can we get this posted in Word docs?
Sure.
Somebody,
I'll get someone to
ordered that item.
Okay. Permanent, I'm sorry. Permanent Improvement Committee?
We haven't had any meetings yet this year, but we did have a kind of permanent improvement work session at 5 today.
Okay.
An extensive PI discussion at 5.
We did. We catch that on the video, it was videotaped. We have Board Policy Committee. We have not met. Are we due very
Yep.
soon?
So all of your district committee or board committees are only required to meet twice a year. So we typically meet after we get updates with board policy, which will receive an update most likely in February, so meet like in March or April.
Gotcha. Okay. Item 10, District Committee Reports. We have Transportation Appeals Committee. Cuyahoga Valley Career Center report. Did Mr. Gilbride get invited?
You did get invited?
Okay. Okay, and I know that they had their, they sent out a nice communication, the call, which was really great. They also had their orientation night that I know a lot of our parents were going to. And I saw really helpful on Facebook that a parent posted a picture of their student who's from Brecksville in the construction management. And, you know, she's going to be using that skill because she's gonna go in the theater and build set design. So, you know, that's wonderful, showing, you know, how, you know, some of these careers that we have, these career paths over there translate differently in ways you wouldn't even think of in the real world. So that's helpful. And I will pass it on to Mr. Gilbride. Safety and security meeting report.
We have a meeting scheduled for February 4th,
Yeah.
5th, yes.
School foundations report.
Last reminder, February 13th, 7 o'clock, New Orleans Party Center. We just scored Cavs tickets, so that's in the hopper. And we sold one package for the silent auction, which is opened up now.
You sold it like at the bid price, right? Like at the, what's
The
it?
buy now price.
Yeah, buy now price, there you go. Okay, and then are you doing wine pool again?
Oh, yeah.
So are
Changing
you
up a
looking-
little bit.
Okay,
Yeah.
you're not looking for wine donations?
Sure, I'll take one donation.
You're just doing that so you get it in your office. Yeah?
I'm actually.
I know the scam now, all right? I never saw that
I'm
one.
actually collecting $20, so I can do cash. 'Cause I'm
Okay, cash?
Yeah.
Okay,
Probably.
cash or,
sure.
okay. I know one person gives a pricey bottle. Do you want, that's irrelevant, what it costs, right? One board member used to, and that same board member will donate that bottle.
That's fine.
You don't need to know that.
You need to know that, that's fine. I'll take it.
I want it wrapped differently, that's all I'm gonna say. No. Okay.
You want Ripple?
We got 0 complaints last year about the quality of wine, 0.
0.
Right?
Yeah, and nobody like napped the table over? That was a favorite, you remember that sideshow the year before? That didn't happen.
We're
Where's
good.
Brian? Mr. Whitecup, oh, I can't see his face. All right, very good. All right, we have the PSO report.
Just a few things. High school PSO, their No Fuss fundraiser is continuing to January 31st. Their goal is to raise $3,600 in donations for a makerspace to make banners and posters for the district. A Zen Den, a quiet, calm space for any student who needs time to reset during their school day. And if the goal is met or exceeded, a filtered water fountain at the high school stadium. Brecksville Bellevue Heights High School Show Choir, Music and Motion will perform Ticket to Broadway, January 25th at 7 p.m. The GoFundMe is ongoing for the middle school auditorium renovation. Contributions can be made online at the middle school PSO site. Then the Rick Smith Magic Show is coming up on the 22nd of February at 7 p.m. at the middle school. Tickets are available again for the middle school PSO. Finally, the Hilton PSO has a bingo night coming up January 24th from 6 to 8 p.m.
So just a comment on that Zen Den, that's the power of social media. So I had found an article and posted it on Facebook and it got shared. And, you know, any good ideas you have, send our way. The PSO picked up on it and they're like, we're gonna explore that. And that's where the idea came. After they explored it, they're going to, you know, start that at the high school. So it just shows you, if you bring those new ideas, push them out, something may happen. We have other board member reports. Fred, I'm gonna give you this opportunity to represent. You have some tickets in your pocket.
Yes, I do.
And what do you have those tickets for?
I have tickets in my pocket, well, now they're out here, for the Kiwanis and Bellevue Heights Lions Club Empty Bowls project. It's a project that helps to serve our local food banks. It is Tuesday, February 4th, 5 to 7:30 p.m. at the Cuyahoga Valley Career Center. You can see any Kiwanian or any Bellevue Heights Lion for tickets, and I just happen to have several right here.
There you go. So he'll be after the meeting.
After the meeting.
You can get your tickets here.
Oh,
It does sell out.
Tickets, wait a minute, tickets are $15.
And you get a free bowl,
And you get a free bowl.
handmade.
You want to do it?
Nope. I just love the bowl. All right, sorry. All right, anything else? We're gonna move on. Item 11, superintendent's announcements.
I think I did my announcements before. I was gonna talk through Ed Joyce and where we were on that, so.
Okay, good. Item 12, superintendent's consent agenda. We have A, certified recommendations, B, classified recommendations, C, supplemental recommendations, D, approval of superintendent's consent agenda. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions on any of the recommendations?
No, roll call.
Mr. Dolson?
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack?
Yes. Item 13, superintendent's other business. We have A, OHSAA membership, B, high school options, book revisions, C, approval of superintendent's other business. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions on either of the items?
So we're,
Just annual approvables, so we have to be, you have to board approve that we're part of OHSAA each year, and then this is the high school options, the course catalog, for lack of a better word, that's all online, we don't print it. Options for kids for the 2020-2021 school year.
so I was looking through that, and I'm gonna be honest with you. I really didn't look through it before, which is really horrible, but I noticed that there's all these stamped seals you can get. How do we push that out to our parents? There's the service seal,
Sure.
there was like, I don't even remember, but how do we push that out so that maybe their parents can say, you know, we're the ones who light the fire under our kids' bottoms sometimes, so.
So it's a requirement of graduation now that you have to, so the district has to come up with 2 local seals, and then you, there's all the seals that are coming from the state, and a student has to earn 2 of those. There's been information nights at the high school with parents to push out that information.
Yeah,
And so they put the seals in the course books to, you know, so kids can see, if you take this course, this would be eligible for this particular seal. It's effective. I knew you were gonna.
No.
Ask this question. I can't remember what
No.
graduation class
Right.
it's effective
Says
with.
it's 2023.
Sophomore,
Yeah.
23 sophomores, yeah, our sophomore class.
22.
They now have to earn these seals as
so
part
I
of
can put that
graduation.
on my, is that something good to put on my college application, that I have this seal?
No, that, well,
Does that
they're,
differentiate me?
they're mandatory, so what
Yeah.
differentiates you is what seals you choose. And so the idea about this was that, you know, kids have a variety of different interests, and they might not be good in a particular subject area, but they can get a seal like in the fine arts, or they can get a seal in music. So it gives another path for graduation, or another way that you can meet that requirement for graduation if
Okay,
you have an
gotcha.
interest. Yeah.
Okay.
Did I do it justice, Dave?
Yeah, to answer your question, Kathleen, I think they did survey a number of business and organizations in the state of Ohio, and they said that yes, we are looking for employees that have these certain characteristics, and therefore, that's where the seals came from. How many are there, like 13 or something?
Yeah, we're required to develop 2 locally, and then I think that was.
The reason why I circle back, and because I was looking at, like, for example, my son's resume, I didn't see he must have the seals, but he didn't mention the seals on his resume when he was like sending it to Miami's food service, like to apply for a cafeteria, so,
They weren't
It's
impacted
in that now, yeah, so.
okay,
when it-
so
it'll
that's
become
two, that you
effective.
just said that, and I missed that part, okay.
So they'll
Gotcha.
show up on the resume, or the transcripts. And then I believe on the diploma, if we can do that, because they might be gone, but we're working
Okay.
on that. So yeah, to answer your question, the state is saying that they think that it's going to add a little weight to a resume in the future.
So that's a new development, so maybe I didn't necessarily miss it, it's new. I'm trying to let my, okay, good. All right, roll call.
Mr. Dolson?
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack?
Yes. Item 14, Treasurer's Consent Agenda with A, Financial Report December 2019, B, Budget Modification, C, Minutes of 2018 and January 8th meetings, D, Donations, E, Approval of Treasurer's Consent Agenda. May I have a motion?
So moved.
You're on.
On the financial statement, just to repeat what Mr. Dolson said. Just year-to-date, from last year to this year, we are down in expenditures of about $131,800, which is good. Revenue is up about $742,000, which both of these items, if they stay stable, could give us an extra $1 million in our account for this year. The $742,000 is creative financing by Mr. Dolson. About the buses, we took the bus, moved buses again out of the general fund and put it in the PI fund, which gave us an additional $471,000. There's a budget transfer, which you do annually from the PI fund, 9,100, to the turf project in the amount of $10,000. And the budget modifications, you've done about 3 of these since I've been here. The minutes. That's it, Madam President.
Okay, roll call.
Mr. Dolson?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack?
Yes. Item 15, closing items. A, announcements. This is where I'd like to ask board members, we had discussed, so we can do more business, more, and all of our business in public, we'd like to ask, we came up with this idea until our retreat to have a February 11th or a February 10th mid-board meeting. And then if we don't need it, then we'll remove it, but it sounds like it's starting to fill in with at least one item, which is the scope of the tennis. So I'm gonna ask you to check your calendars, get back to Mrs. Magyar, unless you wanna check them now. We were looking at a 5 o'clock start time, is that correct?
5:30.
5:30 start time, just trying to, I'll be 5 minutes late at 5:30. I can
Make that later. Was there a reason?
Yes, because it's the boys basketball senior night that I have to be at 6:30, so we were meeting earlier to accommodate, so I can.
And we weren't looking for it to be a full-blown meeting, just like a chance to talk about updates or anything Mrs. Magyar needs to have addressed with us. So, we have 5:30, one board member will be 5 minutes late. What was the date again?
February 11th was the day that we had.
Is that a
Right.
Tuesday.
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 Yeah, that's fine. Everybody else, you good? Okay. So we'll go with that and we'll keep you updated. We need to have that or not, we'll let you know. Seems like we do. Okay. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, roll call.
Mr. Dolson?
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack?
Yes. We're now adjourned.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.